100 years on, Cousin Stephen set up an adventure for us to re-ride our grandfather's motorcycle trips in Australia 100 years ago, 1926. Should be an adventure for us. Hello, and here we are, 100 years on. This fun recording of the project Cousin Stephen started, where we're looking to recreate the motorcycle adventures of our grandfather, 100 years on. So, grandfather and his brother Philip, 23 and 19, setting off for Australia and motorcycling around lots of it. Why? Well, they were following in their grandfather's footsteps, and their grandfather was an extraordinary chap. His family had been tenant farmers in Devon, and at the age of 16 he left for Australia with what's described as drapery, so fabrics and for stuff like curtains and furniture and things like this. And he got to Adelaide. Australia had recently stopped being a penal colony, so things were starting to boom there, lots of people moving out. And his drapery business he set up on a piece of scrubland outside Adelaide, and it seems he did so well that within 9 years he had to come back to the UK to make the whole importing side that much more efficient. So he'd been importing stuff from England, and he needed to make sure he got an awful lot more than he had done previously. So 1849, that means he was born in 1825, 201 years ago. That's a long time ago. So then he came back to Australia with 3 brothers, 2 of whom died quite quickly, it seems. And one, I don't know how, we don't know why, maybe someone will find out at some stage. And his brother Richard and he carried on and did quite well. Then Richard went back to the UK, and then they swapped places, with George going back and setting himself up in London. And he was doing so well, he had a big house on the edge of Hyde Park, 3 Hyde Park Gate, I think it was. And he had 2 daughters, 4 sons. He was looking after 2 nieces, and they had 5 servants. So it really was quite a good setup. And at the same time, he and his brother Richard were buying an estate in Devon, near to where their mother and brother were still farming. So yeah, Pepperden was a hall. They built a hall down there, and my father remembers going down there with his 2 brothers at the beginning of the Second World War to get away from London, which was under attack. But father and his 2 brothers later got shipped off to Australia as well for most of the war. I'm looking forward to meeting Uncle John in Australia. He's the last surviving brother, and I'm sure he'll correct an awful lot of the family fables that I've misremembered from grandmother's telling. It's one of those sad things. You only realise when you get older that you didn't spend enough time with grandparents learning about the family history and taking more of an interest. I suppose when you're young, you're far more interested in getting stuff for yourself, really. Looking at this gorgeous view around here. We'll flip the camera in a second. So yes, George had his 4 sons. One of those 4 was Charles Percy, who was the father of our grandfather Lionel, our great-grandfather. The business, though, that George had set up was doing so well, he set up a shipping company with his brother Richard, and they became one of the biggest shipping agencies in Australia. And I'm going to stop here to show you the lovely view. One sec. There we go. This is Le Marche. This is central Italy, and maybe I can zoom in and find a little bit of seaside over there. Oh no, tiny thin blue line, as they say. But that's Fermo, the provincial town, and then we pan around to the rolling countryside, the rolling hills of Le Marche. And if we keep going a little bit, we shall see the mountains that still have snow on them, which is the middle of February. Here we are, it's quite chilly, it's about 4 degrees at the moment. And of course, typically, we can't see the mountains, but we can see the old town itself. Ah, lovely. Right, zoom back. Flip back, and here we are again, carrying on the story. George Wills. Yeah, George married a lady called Lucy, and down in Devon they set up a home for nurses to look after local poor people, and the people weren't allowed to pay the nurses, and they set up a trust to pay the nurses. And I think if you were rich enough, you had to arrange your own transport for the nurse or something like that. But there we go, they set up a little trust. George died in 1906. He left a will of £959,000. That's a lot of money. Found a book, a 2004 book of the richest Australians ever, and back then he was nominated at number 73. There's been some quite rich Aussies, so he obviously did quite well. Yes, and so Charles Percy, his son, was keeping on the family business. I don't know if he ever went to Australia. There's very little we can find out about him. I don't know. He's not on the internet an awful lot. But Charles Percy married a Clarissa Audrey Patton Beaton, and the Beaton name then got passed down eldest son to eldest son. So the first was my grandfather, and then father, me, and I passed it on to my 2 boys. So yeah, I made a bit of a mistake there because they're actually triplets, and the oldest of the 3 was my daughter, and I didn't pass it on to her, which is, there we go. Maybe one day she'll change her name by deed poll or something and pick it up again. But that's the history of that name, and that brings us on really to grandfather, and I think he'll be the subject of another little stroll around this ancient town. Okay, hope you have a gorgeous day.